Good evening. We welcome you here to our regular City Council meeting. We call our meeting to order. We note that we have a quorum present, but we have two excused absences, Councilman Steve Bueller and Councilman Corey Rushton. We'll begin tonight with our opening ceremony with Councilmember Karen Lang.
Would you please rise and repeat the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just looking to see if we had any, and I don't see any scout troops here. We always try and recognize them. They often come to visit us. Is there one here? Okay. Generally what we invite you to do is to come up and tell us your troop number, what you're working on, why you're here tonight, and what school you attend. You usually have the young man do that. And you just come up to the microphone. Right. So your troop number, what you're working on, and your school.
My name is Jared, and I am from the troop 440. I'm here to work on citizenship in the community, yes. And I am from Hunter Junior High.
Very good. Well, welcome tonight. Thank you for coming.
Thanks.
I believe that's all. Of course, I thought this young lady might be in, if she would have been a guy, I would have thought she was in Scout, but she's young enough to be. Minutes then to the council for the minutes of February 20th and 21st and from February 24th.
Mayor, I'll move for approval of the February 20th and 21st strategic planning meeting minutes and the February 24th regular meeting minutes.
Thank you very much.
Second.
We have the second. And we've got that noted. Any discussion to the minutes? Seeing none, we'll place that for a vote. All in favor of approving the minutes of February 20th, 21st, and 24th, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. The minutes are approved. We now come to our public comment period. I would make note of two things. If you are here to speak to the public hearing regarding application S-2-2015, Diamond Summit, this is not the time. We'll have a separate public hearing on that. Or if you are here for the discussion on the South Redwood Road Urban Renewal Survey area, also this is not the time. There will be a separate opportunity for that, and actually it'll technically be a separate meeting, and you'll note when we switch over to that. So with that, we have two who are signed up to speak. Daniel Gill. I think it's Gill. You're not here to speak on those other two items. So come up to the microphone.
I'm not sure by what you just said. I think I'm here to speak on something that's coming later. But maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying.
The Redwood Road portion over by
4100 South and Redwood Road?
Yes.
That should be now?
Later. No, later.
That's what I thought. So
Okay.
I must have signed the wrong column.
No, you're fine. There were several others that did as well. And it's Cindy Cronenborg or something like that. I'm sorry, I'm probably getting the last name wrong. Cindy, I'll bet you're here to speak on the...
She just stepped out because she's here for the RDA meeting.
Okay.
I already told her that.
Oh, okay. So with that then, was there any other, this is the public comment portion where you can actually take 5 minutes on any subject. And so sometimes we have a few, sometimes not. With that then, we'll move on. Any comments from our city manager on our agenda?
No, sir, thank you.
Any comments from the city council? Seeing none, then we'll go on to item number 7 on our agenda. This is regarding, the next item on our agenda is application S-2-2015 filed by Terry Holmes. This is for final plat approval for Diamond Summit Unit 15C, and that needs to be amended. This is the one where we as a city purchased one of the lots in order to have access from that subdivision to the Mountain View Corridor Trail. We were going to develop that. As it turns out, in the development of that subdivision, there was a problem with 4 feet on a lot, just right close to what we had purchased. And in an agreement that we have worked with them, we will deed to them 4 feet of that piece of property. In return, they will develop the trail across that to do most of the work, which we believe is a very appropriate way to do that. And so that is the issue that is before us, to amend that to change those lots. So I will declare open the public input portion and invite anyone who is here to speak on this issue to come forward to the microphone. Is there anyone here? If you'll state your name and address.
Mayor and City Council, my name is Jeff Taylor with Prairie Homes. I appreciate you considering this. We have gone through this change with the Parks Department, and we appreciate what you're doing to accommodate this change. We think what has been agreed to is fair, and we just want you to know we appreciate your consideration of this.
Thank you very much. Any questions from the council? Anyone else? Okay, with that then, I will declare closed the public comment period on this application. And now we will consider ordinance number 15-10, approving the amendment of lots 1501 to 1503 of the Diamond Summit Unit 15C subdivision. To the council.
Mayor, I'll move for approval of ordinance number 15-10.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
Councilman Yoon has a second. Motion is before us properly. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll place that for a vote. All in favor of approving ordinance number 15-10 in the Diamond Summit to amend those lots, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. The ordinance is approved. We now go to item number 8 on our agenda, resolutions. We'll begin with 15-44. This is to award a construction contract for the River Canal detention structure project. This is to put some flood control structures in place there so that the flow is restricted to the allotted amount. And so this is just to prevent any future problems. That is the item that is before us. And so to the council then, for your information of those of you who are here to talk and watch what we're doing, these are items that we discussed last week in our study meeting, so we had an opportunity to delve into them in detail. So if it seems like we're moving fairly quickly, if there's no one here to question it, that's normal, because we've already spent time on it last week, so this is the second time we've been hearing it. With that comment then, back to the council.
Motion to approve resolution 15-44.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have the second before us. Then, any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll place it for a vote. All in favor of approving resolution 15-44, a contract to FX Construction for the River Canal detention structure project, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passed unanimously. The resolution is approved. We now go to resolution 15-45 to accept a grant of temporary construction easement from Bailey Lot Leasing. This is at 2602 South, 3270 West. And this is just a temporary use to be able to do some work on a road there, but to have access to use people's property as we're working on that makes it much easier to get the work done. Therefore, we have a temporary construction easement. With that, to the council.
Mayor, I move for approval of resolution 15-45.
We have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have the second. Councilman Northfeld. Then it's properly before us. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll place that for a vote. All in favor of approving resolution 15-45, a temporary construction easement from Bailey Lot Leasing, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passed unanimously. The resolution is approved. We now go to item number 9 on our agenda, new business. This is to consider application S-1-2015 filed by Natomas Meadows requesting final plat approval for ARA Industrial Center Subdivision Phase 1 at 2450 South, 6755 West. This was an area that is zoned for manufacturing. This will create, I believe, 2 lots there. And so that is the issue that is before us. Then to the council.
Mayor, I move for approval of application S-1-2015.
We have a motion to approve before us. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have the second. Motion is properly before us. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll place it for a vote. All in favor of approving S-1-2015 for final plat approval for the ARA Industrial Center subdivision, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passed unanimously. The application is approved. We now go to application number PUD-1-2014 filed by Oakwood Homes requesting final plat approval for villages at West Ridge Phase 3. This is at 5200 South, 5600 West. These are for 3- and 4-plex town home units that are designed to look like single-family dwellings. There were some issues that they went back and worked on that have now been able to get resolved, and that is now before us. To the council then for
Mayor,
action.
just a few comments before
Please.
I make a motion.
That's perfectly appropriate.
This project's been kind of in the loop for quite a number of years. It's been through a lot of different design elements, and I think we're finally to a point where I think we can move forward with the new designs, and so I'll move for approval of application. Let's see, which one are we? PUD 1-2014.
The motion is before us. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. The motion is now fully before us. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll place it for vote. All in favor of approving application PUD-1-2014 from Oakwood Homes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passed unanimously. The application is approved. I do not believe we have a need for an executive session.
No, sir.
So we'll skip that. That completes the work of our regular council meeting. There will be another meeting immediately following this, which many of you are here to speak on. So stay tuned. With that then, seeing no further business, then one final motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. Our regular city council meeting is adjourned.
We call to order the West Valley City Redevelopment Agency meeting. We know that we've had a roll call, or opening ceremony and a roll call. We excused Mr. Bueller and Mr. Rushton from tonight's meeting, but we do have a quorum. Mr. Can we change you in the guard?
Not yet.
Okay. Mr. Powell, would you please introduce tonight's item?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So we are here to consider the blight hearing and presentation of evidence or the existence or the non-existence of blight within a proposed redevelopment survey area that we have. This is approximately centered around 4100 South and Redwood Road. We have a number of folks here that are going to walk us through a very lockstep process this evening. We have Mr. John Springmeyer, Mr. Jeff, I forgot your last name. Jackson, geez, sorry. We also have Mark Nord behind him. We have Brandon from our legal department. We've got Steve, as well as a number of folks that may be able to help us with that process. I do have to apologize. I may have to leave in the middle of the hearing here, ma'am, but to your question, I'm here for at least the present. Now, I also understand, well, never mind. I'll save my comment for later on as we get into the process. At this time, however, are we turning over the time to you, Jeff? Okay, all right.
My turn?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay. My name is Jeff Jackson. I'm with the West Valley City Economic Development Department and the RDA. And we are here to discuss the South Redwood Road URA, Urban Renewable Area, which is the new term for RDA. And just a brief introduction. As an Economic Development Department and RDA, we're constantly looking around the city for opportunities and areas that we see might be tired or look like they're ready for some redevelopment. And in order to do that and facilitate that type of development, we offer a set of tools by way of establishing an urban renewal area to business owners or land developers or just redevelopers in general, to give them the resources and provide tools to help them make sure that those things can happen. The reason for establishing blight is it's a step. State law requires that you establish blight. Blight does not mean that businesses close. Doesn't mean that people are removed from their businesses, or doesn't mean that they've got a black mark anywhere. But what it does mean is it means that we're establishing the need for redevelopment so that we can be approved for an urban renewal area, so that it is possible. Without a blight hearing and without establishing that blight, we aren't able to offer those tools and offer or establish an urban renewal area. It's been done in 15 other areas within the city, and it's worked out great. We've had enormous success. A lot of businesses have been able to redevelop, expand, rehab, or do new stuff on their site. I wanted to quickly show some boundaries. If people can see, or just the council can see, we've gone 4100 South. You'll see in Redwood Road, the Kmart site is basically kind of our genesis here. There's a developer, the owner of that is looking to redevelop that site. And rather than exclude the commercial properties around from benefiting from the URA, we wanted to draw a boundary that jogged up north. And so you'll see we've excluded the residential parcels because there's no need to include residential in this type of a project area. But we've included several parcels so that the Kmart parcel wasn't the only site that benefited from the urban renewal area. You'll see there's an empty stock building. I think they have a one-year tenant, just temporarily. There's several vacant fields. I know that we know and we've spoken with the owners of the theater, the outdoor movie theater, the drive-in, and they're trying to sell their property. I know I don't mean to break anybody's hearts. It's just, and so this includes all those areas so that we can provide the tools for proper redevelopment. Having said that, we have no desire to use eminent domain. We have no desire to have condemnation. Those aren't things that we're looking to do. I know that in some of the letters that were received, some of those terms were there, including blight, and the terms are scarier than they really are. It's simply just a matter of establishing that there is a need for redevelopment so that these tools and resources can become available to all the business owners along this corridor. As a staff, we see a great opportunity for this area. We see that there can be really exciting revitalization and redevelopment, and so we recommend this area to the City Council. Having said that, I certainly appreciate the time and appreciate the time. See you.
So,
To the council for questions.
I was going to say,
Yes.
could you stay long enough for us to ask, and as the board, not the council, but,
Board, sorry.
yes, does anybody on the board have any questions for Mr. Jackson? Yeah, you're forgetting.
Turn the microphone off.
That's okay. No questions? Okay.
Does the renewal area require a certain acreage to qualify? And does it have to be under 100 acres?
I'm not sure. I'm gonna, no particular acreage requirement?
There are no restrictions on acreage on the creation of an urban renewal area. It can be as large or small as the municipality deems appropriate.
And the need to go larger is just to capture more tax increment?
That's right. Just offer opportunity to all the commercial areas around there instead of just make it exclusive to one property.
Thank you, Chairman Lamb. Hey, question I asked you about the open movie theater. It says the seller willing to sell, right? That property?
We know they've been discussing it. We've had several parties just asking us questions and calling. So it's I don't think there's a for sale sign, but it's for sale.
For sale, and you guys discussing the number? It's a fair market price, or?
We as a city haven't had any discussions with the sellers as far as what their price is. I think just mainly private developers have had that discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We will now have a presentation by Mr. John Springmeyer.
Thank you all. Appreciate the opportunity to be here in front of you. I am, like I said, I'm John Springmeyer. I am the president of Bonneville Research. We were contracted by the city to assist as a consultant in the creation of this proposed urban renewal project area. Part of that is the performance of a blight survey. The results of that blight survey are the reason I'm here in front of you tonight, and with your permission I'd like to go through and give you the results of that. Quickly, as we go through what we're going to be talking about a little bit, a brief overview of what the Utah Community Development and Renewal Agencies Act requires. We'll review the data that was collected and what the determination of the blight based on that data collected and the tests that are outlined in the code. The Utah Urban Renewal Act requires the collection of technical documentation, which is to be considered by yourself, the legislative body, in supporting of a finding of blight. And the factors which would contribute to blight. Some of those requirements in finding a blight are that the proposed project area is within a predominantly non-greenfield parcels. It's in an area that's currently zoned for urban purposes and generally served by utilities. At least 50% of the parcels contain non-ag or non-accessory buildings or improvements. And that the present condition of the proposed project area substantially impairs the sound growth of the municipality, retards the provision of housing accommodations, or constitutes an economic liability, or is detrimental to the public health, safety, or welfare, as shown by the existence within the proposed project area of 4 of the following factors. What I'd like to do with this is go through each of these individual factors. I'll give you the percentages of the parcels that met that had findings that meet that blight factor, and then we'll give some photo evidence outlining just as examples of the type of things we saw. So the first legislative blight factor is, although sometimes interspersed with well-maintained buildings, I think that's an important distinction for the property owners that are behind me, that just because your building may be, your property may be in an area that we may deem tonight to be in a blighted area, doesn't necessarily mean that you've been a bad steward of your property, or that your property itself would be considered, quote, blighted. The law does take into consideration that there are well-maintained areas and properties that can be within a blighted area. So we have substantial physical dilapidation, deterioration, or defective construction of buildings or infrastructure, or significant non-compliance with current building code, safety code, health code, or fire code requirements or local ordinances. And I want to touch on this one just quickly. One of the common confusions with property owners is on this non-compliance with current building code. They'll say, my building was built in 1978, and when I get my business license renewed every year, I'm responsible to maintain my building to the code that was in effect in 1978, unless I have to unless I'm doing some substantial remodeling that requires to take out a new building permit, then I'd have to raise that level. That is absolutely the case. But that's not what the blight test calls for. The blight test calls for current code, code as it stands today. Now, the other confusing part is this: just because your building may not meet current code requirements has no bearing on your ability to continue to operate that building. The blight requirement of current code and your building license requirement of the code when your building was built are two separate, completely different instances. So the finding of blight doesn't mean you're going to have to change your parking structure or parking lot in order to meet the current codes. Does that make sense? The unsafe or unsanitary conditions in the proposed project area that threaten the health, safety, welfare of the community. Environmental hazards as defined in state or federal law that require remediation as a condition for future use, current or future use and development. Excessive vacancy, abandoned buildings, or vacant lots is within an area zoned for urban use and served by utilities. Abandoned or outdated facilities that pose a threat to public health, safety, or welfare. Criminal activity in the project area higher than that of a comparable non-blighted area in the municipality, or defective or unusual conditions of title. So, there we go. The causes of blight, it's important to note that the finding of blight it's a cumulative, I'm not getting that word right, cumulative conclusion based on the existence of several factors. We're not dealing with one individual factor that we can spread around on all parcels or on all properties, but it's the function of several physical, economic, and environmental conditions which in combination can create the phenomenon known as blight. Equally important to note that, as I somewhat alluded to earlier, what we're doing tonight is discussing the blighted as an area. That blight, the denotation of blight isn't going to be placed on individual parcels, but rather on an entire project area. We don't go through and say this property is blighted and that property is blighted while that property is not. It's an area-wide finding that we look for. Briefly on the survey area. Survey area totals 94.37 acres. 75 total parcels are in the project area, or in the survey area, excuse me. We are proposing that the project area mirror the survey area. In my experience, or in my recommendation, is that there was no reason to exclude any of the parcels that were originally in the survey area from the proposed project area. So the proposed project area is the same 94.37 acres, 75 parcels, and all of those parcels have buildings and/or improvements on them. Now, that can mean, when we say buildings or improvements, we do have some vacant lots within this project area, but those are still improved. They have sidewalk, they have curb gutter, they have utilities that are run to them. So by definition, they're still improved, even though they may not have a building on that property. On to the actual findings. So with A1, with substantial physical dilapidation, deterioration, or defective construction, we look at things such as not meeting commercial building standards, inadequate landscaping, vacant lands, to name a few. Our study showed that all 75 parcels within the project area showed one met this blight standard, and obviously 100% of the acreage. Outline just some brief examples, and if to the property owners behind me, if I happen to have picked a slide that is your property, please don't hold it against me. It wasn't intentional. I just pulled out some slides that I thought were good examples of the blight in the area. Obviously a parking area within the project area, refuse, open weeds, and some open access to some back garages, more parking issues. And I know this property owner is behind me, so forgive me. We've got what used to be a sign, looks like a monument sign pole that's still got the base and some of the remnants of the sign there, as well as looks like just electrical pull string. I didn't put my tongue to it to make sure though. The A2 is significant non-compliance with the current building code, safety code, or fire code requirements. Some of the things we'll look for: non-compliance with building codes, inadequate storm drainage, improper building setback, curb and sidewalk deficiencies. For this one, we found, again, 75 of the 75 parcels contained one or more of these blight factors. This is a vehicle, the temporary sticker in the back, you can't see what that says. That was dated October 2013. This property owner, I think, yep, hi Joan. I think it's behind me. She knew I was going to do this, so this isn't a surprise to her. This is one where, I know. This is one where we have a good example of a building and a parking structure specifically that was built at a time when probably Salt Lake County did not require a paved surface or a non-permeable surface for parking area. That's what we've got here. That is no longer the current code. And as I explained to Joan, that doesn't, if you find tonight to adopt this blight study, that doesn't mean that Joan needs to change her parking lot to bring it up to current code. That's a separate function. She's still within her, she's met all of her conditions as a property owner as required by her, but for the blight study, this does not meet current code. Got a fire hydrant here and a power pole that are somewhat protected on one side with a couple of bollards, but the other side is wide open. Electrical junction box. On to B, unsanitary or unsafe conditions in the proposed project area that threaten the health, safety, or welfare of the community. Here we'll look at, some of the things we'll look at is significant noncompliance with mechanical codes, health department complaints, outside storage of used materials. Here we found evidence on 43 of the 75 parcels, representing 57% of the number of parcels, but that totaled 95% of the total acreage. This is one of 2 of the 7 findings that, due to the language in the finding itself and due to the very nature of unsafe or unsanitary conditions that threaten the health, safety, or welfare of the community, I think you can understand if you've got a property next door to you that has got some of these, some of these issues, mechanical, non-compliant with mechanical codes, or we've got some, some unsafe or unsanitary conditions. If you've got outdoor open storage or open outdoor storage of used materials, that can have an effect on parcels beyond just that individual parcel itself. And it has, you can, if the house across the street from you is run down and storing their trash on their front yard, that has an adverse effect, could have an adverse effect on your property. In this case, where we have the 95% of the total acreage in the project area showing conditions, unsafe or unsanitary conditions, we deem this to be an area-wide finding. And again, a few examples. This is a rodent trap, poison trap. This, in my experience, this was a temporary residence, we'll call it. That's camp. This was behind the Kmart. There was a blanket, there was some food, there was some personal items in there. This, and I noted as I came in today, this picture has actually changed. This property has changed since this photograph was taken. Those railroad ties are still there, and the cut across them that the railroad ties are blocking are still there, but the property is now filled with used, previously owned vehicles that are currently for sale. We looked at environmental hazards as defined in state federal law. Some of the things we look at here are leaking underground storage tank sites or LUST sites, and underground storage tank compliance violations. Often I'll get asked, why do we look at a closed LUST site? If you've got a gas station in the city where, and any gas station that was built prior to probably 1985 is going to leak. Eventually they're going to leak. If that tank has been removed and it's been remediated, why is it still considered to be a blight factor? Because they're remediated to the level that is required by that use today, by its current use. So if you're still operating a gas station and you pulled out your old tanks and dropped in a new tank, or just pulled the tanks out and it's now a closed gas station, you remediated to that level. Well, what happens if that business is sold and it now becomes a restaurant? What happens if it becomes a daycare or a school? What happens if it becomes if it's part of a greater acquisition and turns residential? Now that remediation is no longer compliant with that current use. So for that reason, because we talk about current and future potential uses of the property, we consider closed LUST sites as a blight factor, even though, again, the property owner has done everything that's been required of them under the law and is in complete compliance. For environmental hazards, there were 3 properties that had, 2 were closed LUST sites, and 1 was for a compliance violation on an underground storage tank. The 3 of the 75 represented 4% of the parcels, or 2% of the total acreage. Those are two of the properties. Excessive vacancy, abandoned buildings or vacant lots. We look at vacant commercial property. We look at properties that are posted for sale or for lease. We look at vacant and dysfunctional land, to name a few. Here we found 46 of the 75 parcels showed evidence of excessive vacancy. They represented 61% of the parcels and 52% of the total acreage. This is the other parcel, or the other blight finding that is deemed to be an area-wide finding. Again, I think you can understand for similar reasons. If your property is surrounded on four sides by either vacant land or vacant property, vacant buildings, that can have a very adverse effect on your property. The retail vacancy rate in this portion of the valley right now is about 11%. We are sitting at a 52% of the acreage is deemed vacant. So, therefore, we have determined this to be also an area-wide finding. And here's another one where I know the property owner is right behind me and to my left. But I've shown her this too, so I don't think she's going to throw anything at me. Here we've got, again, vacant and for lease properties, and properties for lease or for sale. Vacant properties over around the Smiths. Abandoned or outdated facilities that pose a threat to public health, safety, or welfare. One of the things we look at are buildings that were built prior to the enactment of the state seismic code. Again, similar with the other codes, that doesn't mean the building has to change. It just means that's a function of it's one of the blight factors that we're going to look at. Insufficient off-street parking. We found it with evidence of abandoned or outdated facilities that 29 of the 75 parcels showed evidence of this. That's 39% of the parcels, represented 68% of the total proposed project area. With criminal activity, we look, the statute says criminal activity in the project area higher than that of a comparable non-blighted area within the municipality or the county. So we worked with your police department, determined what a reasonable comparable area would be given the retail commercial nature of this area. We chose 5600 West corridor as a comparable area. And the police department provided to me all of the calls for police service for a 12-month period of time for both of these, both the proposed project area as well as the comparable area. Now, some of those, the 56 West area is a lot bigger, it's got bigger buildings, so what I did is looked at the calls for service per square foot of retail to try to get to an apples-to-apples comparison. What we found is that the proposed project area did not, in fact, have a higher level of criminal activity than the comparable project, or the comparable area. So we have none of the properties in the area show that blight finding. That being said, we still do have a couple of examples of some graffiti and illegally stored vehicles in the project area. The last one is one that I'm told was done specifically for one particular project area or one municipality when I say it was done, when the legislature rewrote the blight statutes, and that's with defective or unusual conditions of title. We did not find any of the properties here that had defective or unusual conditions of title. So, summary of this. We had at least 50% of the parcels. This is some of the code requirements. At least 50% of the parcels in the proposed project area are affected by, that says at least, it should say at least with a T, one of the factors, but not the same factor, and that those affected parcels comprise at least 66% of the acreage within the project area. In our proposed project area, again, we have 75 parcels. We have 75 parcels that showed at least one blight factor. We have 30 of those parcels that show at least 4 factors. Though that's 40% of the total parcels, and the acreage of that is 68%. Again, the bar is that the existence of at least one factor on all the properties, or on each property, and the existence of at least 4 within the project area, and we have at least 5, with 5 of the 7 shown at some point within the project area. Based on this, it is my determination that the proposed project area does meet the state standards for blight, and would recommend that this board fine accordingly. At this point, I can take questions before we move on to the next phase of the agenda. If there are any questions for me on the material.
Any questions from the board?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Want me to?
Wait just one second.
You bet.
So this is where the rest of the agenda gets very technical. So the next step is for questions for Mr. Springmeyer from the audience that are directly related to his presentation. And then later in the agenda is where you can give testimony or evidence contrary to what he has presented. So just for a show of hands, is there anybody that has questions for Mr. Springmeyer related to his presentation? Yes. So Mr. Springmeyer, if you'll come up to the dais, and then when you come up, if you'll give your name and address for the record, just right here by Mr. Powell, please. And you can just come to the microphone.
Gotcha.
And name and address, please.
Joan, 3910 South, Redwood. I would like you to explain to everyone what possible problems this might create for the landowners.
What possible problems this might create for the landowners?
Right.
In my professional opinion, in my experience, I would say that there are very few, if any, problems that this could pose for property owners. Understanding that this is step 1 in a process in order to create this project area. Step 2 will be coming sometime in the next probably 60 to 90 days with a plan and budget hearing. So we've got a lot more opportunity to, for the board to hear the concerns and the input from the public. This is step 1. But as far as the blight study goes, a determination of blight or a blight on an area will never show up on any title report. It will never show up on if anything that would be detrimental to you marketing your property. It would not prevent you from selling, from borrowing against, from leasing, from remodeling, from demoing, any of the things you may want to do as a property owner. This determination will not prevent you from doing any of those. If an urban renewal area, project area is created, and it's, you know, the board here will weigh in on that as we go. There may be some opportunities, as Jeff said, and some tools that may help you as property owners if you choose or if you have desires to redevelop that property. But in my experience, Joan, no, I don't believe there are any adverse ramifications from this, from determining this as a blighted area.
Will anybody be forced to participate?
forced to participate, meaning forced to be in the project area?
No, forced to change their property.
Absolutely not.
And it's already been stated that eminent domain will not be used.
I think it was stated that the city, and this is not my call, but you know, I'm a consultant that's hired.
I know what you're going to
help out
say.
here.
I don't want to ask him. I would like to ask him.
I will say that what I heard was that the city has no intentions at this point and no plans right now of using eminent domain. It is a power that is afforded to urban renewal project areas if this is in fact created. It is also a power that this board could decide not to employ. They could relinquish that power in the beginning. I would and will, at the time being, counsel against that because frankly, we don't know what the future holds. I've seen more than one municipality run into lots of problems and cost lots of money to the city because they decided to forego that power in order to quell the concerns and understandable concerns about eminent domain from the property owners.
So if there won't be any force used, what would be the purpose of using eminent domain?
Eminent domain, I think eminent domain has a couple of uses, a couple of purposes if it's not used to actually condemn and purchase property. And understand, even with the power of eminent domain, if it were used, and it is a high bar within the state in order to use eminent domain now. This being a commercial area, it would require, and the city, the city, the council, the mayor cannot institute and cannot begin the process of using eminent domain. That's not within their rights under the current law. That right has to be exercised by the property owners. Property owners within the project area would have to sign a petition and then petition the council and the city to exercise eminent domain on another parcel, another property within the project area. The people signing that petition would have to represent 75% of all of the properties within that project area, and those properties would also have to be represent 60% of the total value of those properties in the project area. So it's a high bar to use in the first place. Now, where it can be useful, in my opinion, is in two ways. If, for example, and we've talked about one being for, potentially for sale, I don't think anyone from the drive-through is here. We'll just use a hypothetical for them as example. If they were to sell their property, they would be, as selling commercial property, they would be subject to paying capital gains tax on the financial gain on that property. With that property owner could ask the city to give them what we call a friendly threat of eminent domain. They would give them a letter. They could give them a letter stating that the city has the power of eminent domain and may at some time use that. Having that letter means that they now have doubled the time that they have to do a tax-free exchange, meaning taking the money they made from that property and putting it into another property. Normally you have 1 year under the tax code to do what they call a 1031 exchange. With the threat of eminent domain, that time doubles to 2 years. So there's one where a positive tool, and I've seen on several occasions where property owners will come in and do just that and request that letter because they want that extra time. The other instance is it helps make sure that if we have a development or redevelopment coming in, and say we've got someone that's coming in and buying up some properties, and suddenly someone's thinking about that retirement house in the Bahamas, and that sounds really good, and their property that market value might be $250,000, but they're thinking, hey, this guy really needs my property. I'm going to ask $5 million for it, and they're holding up the works. Eminent domain can you know, if needed, can help regulate and keep both parties, willing buyer and willing seller, into an honest and appropriate negotiation.
I know the situation you're talking about where the band had the sign and required Sugar House to pay, was it $2 billion?
It was the city of Holiday, and it was 2.5.
Okay, so, but that situation, based on our map, I don't see that that would ever be a possibility, that we would be trying to force somebody to sell or do anything. Can you see in our map where that might be?
I think it's probably unlikely, but one of the things we try to do when we're creating these, and especially when we get into the next phase in planning in writing and presenting the plan and budget, is this is going to be a project area that we're going to recommend for probably 15 or so years. And we don't know exactly what the land use is going to be, or what the future development is going to be, or redevelopment in the next 5 years, let alone 15 years. So trying to, you know, if I had a crystal ball, I'd be in Vegas at the, you know, checking out the BYU Gonzaga game, because I'd already know the outcome of the game. I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. I can say that given, in my experience, given the layout of the property and given the properties in question, I think it's probably unlikely that the city would need to exercise eminent domain.
Okay, and you don't really have any authority in the city, so what we're all nervous about is what do you say about eminent domain? And what do you say about forcing the landowners?
So there will be a point later that you can ask that question of the board.
Okay.
So right now, it's just the presentation that he's given so far.
So that's a heads up to start thinking about it then, huh? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
So is there anyone else that would like to address the board? Or Mr. Springmeyer?
Yeah.
Okay. Look it up and name and address, please.
Cindy Cronenborg, and I'm here for 3885 South Redwood and 3780 South and 3885 South. Now my question is how did you determine these pictures? Because some of the pictures you showed were my properties, but they were like over a year old.
Could you tell me which is your property, just so I've got a reference?
3885 South Redwood and 3780 South Redwood.
Which, and that is which building? What's
The car lot.
Okay.
One that is now a car lot. Because that motorhome was there, somebody abandoned it there.
Okay.
So but we were under lease, we couldn't do anything until the lease was up.
I understand. And they, you know, I drove the properties, and I mean, the original survey was done in the summer and the fall, last summer and fall. I drove the property as recently as 4:30 this afternoon, and I did notice, in fact, that in your property that motorhome is no longer there. I did take notice of that, and honestly, had I not already had the presentation on a thumb drive in my pocket, I would have changed that slide, knowing that property was that example was no longer accurate.
How did you determine what properties were in here? Because we also have 3660 South Redwood, and that's not in there. So there's 3 pieces right there on Redwood.
I don't know. I'm not sure which properties,
well, which properties are included in this?
Are in the proposed project area?
Yeah.
That was not something that I was a part of as far as creating the survey area.
Okay. So then who would I ask?
So we'll ask that
That's
in the next
later. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I can say that even had I changed removed the blight factor that instance that showed that abandoned RV on your property, it would have changed how many blight factors or the specific attributes to your property, but would not have resulted in a change in the total, in the overall findings, the percentages, or my recommendation.
Okay, is there any more questions at this time? Specific to the presentation?
I guess we'll test it out and see.
Come to the mic and give us your name and address, please.
Greetings. Our property is at 3950 South Redwood Road. I'd like to get with you and find out which factors, you said all the properties failed in some certain area. I'd like to know where our properties failed and which ones we were not in compliance with as far as the blight study goes.
Okay.
I'd be interested in that.
I'd be happy to go through line item with you.
Thank you. In the paperwork that we received from the city, it says the project area plan may require the agency to use eminent domain, and the proposed use of eminent domain will be discussed at the blight hearing. So the eminent domain is on the table. It's out here.
And if I intimated that or suggested that it wasn't, that wasn't my intention. City staff stated at the opening that the city has no intentions right now of exercising that right of eminent domain. That is a right that is inherent with an urban renewal project area. As it stands right now, that all we have is a proposed project area. So the city will still have to approve and create the official project area. The city would then have to choose to retain that right of eminent domain within this project area, and then when we end up with the petitioning and the 75 and 60% of the parcels of the properties petitioning the city to use eminent domain before that could ever be in effect.
Eminent domain or blight is the first step toward condemnation, and it goes right down. I mean, this is the first step down that road. And at this point, we say, well, we don't intend to. I guess we'll have to see what the council decides. I have another piece of property that's in the that I met here quite a number of years ago, that they were blighting for the Fairborn Station project, and this was quite a number of years ago. You mentioned that blight would never be on the deed of the property. I just did some other checking on our deed, looking for some other things, and I was shocked to find out that our property has the designation of blight on it. I didn't know it. I didn't go down to the council or to the city county building in the interim, but at the county it does show that our property is blighted. We have been under this cloud for all of the years that we've been. If we wanted to sell our property, any potential buyer would recognize that, oh, this area is blighted. This particular piece of property is in the blight area. And so it restricts our ability to negotiate a sale on our property, because the potential buyer would realize ultimately there's one buyer, and that's West Valley City. And so it restricts your ability to negotiate, because you don't have two buyers competing to buy your property. And so that really is a concern of mine in all of this. And yet I've been told all this time, and this is in relation to the blight, well, you know, I've just said to the city, why don't you buy my property right now? Ultimately, you're going to do it. Why don't you do it now? Oh, we don't have money now. And
I have a question.
And this is about the blight. So is this is what our property now is going to be under, the same kind of restriction if it shows blight.
Was that a question? Are you asking me if that was if you're going to be under restrictions?
Well, In my opinion, it does. What is your opinion?
My opinion is, I guess, a couple of things. One, I'd love to see that title report that shows that you are in a blighted area, because that'll be the first one I've ever seen. And I'm not doubting you, but I've never seen that, and I would like to see that, and I would like to see what the county assessor is doing, determining that, stating that area is in an area that was deemed to be blighted. That being the case, I would challenge your assertion that that is detrimental or in any way hindering your ability to sell the property and limit it to only one buyer. To my knowledge, in what is currently being discussed within this project area, the city has no intentions of purchasing any of the property within these proposed boundaries. Now, that's not to say that in the future they won't. But right now, given what's on the table and what we're discussing, the city has no intention of purchasing any of these properties.
Okay, well, I can bring you my title back in just an hour if you would like. I was shocked to see it there myself.
Yeah.
Because I was looking to see about mineral rights on our property, and when I got it, went to the county records, Salt Lake County is the county, and pulled it up. This is on here?
Let's you and I get together after the meeting. Again, I'm happy to show you all of the sub-factors that I attributed to your property, and then we can talk about how to get me a copy of that.
I would like to see that title also.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that had questions specific to the presentation?
Yes.
Because you'll have an opportunity to ask other questions and give testimony.
I will, thank you.
Would you state your name again, please?
Joan Wilder, 3910 South. Would you please explain to everybody how to opt out?
How to opt out?
Mm-hmm.
Well, a property owner, and we're getting into a legal area that I'm looking Brandon's direction here, but in my experience, property owners can make the request of the board members to have their properties excluded from the proposed project area. The board members can choose to grant that request or not grant that request based on what they see is in the best interest of the project area. It isn't so much an opt-in or opt-out, because that would indicate that there's that the property owners have that choice to come in or come out, but that request can be made as a property owner. But ultimately it'll be up to the board.
If the purpose of this whole project is to help develop and upgrade our area, I think we're all for that. But it seems to me that there ought to be another way to do this without forcing and using the threat of eminent domain.
So do you have a question or testimony?
Yes, I would like to ask, is there another way to do this?
Is there another way to do this without the threat of eminent domain?
And without force. Mm-hmm. Because you've already done this in another area. Did you force anybody in the other area? Were you involved in that other project?
Which other area were we referring to?
35th South on Redwood.
Granger Crossings.
Granger Crossings.
Granger Crossings is a urban renewal area that was approved. It does have the power of eminent domain and does have that for a few years, probably 4 years remaining on that. Mark, shake your head if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, the city has not exercised eminent domain, nor do they have any intentions of doing that in that project area at this point.
Or use the threat of eminent domain?
No.
And there's no intention of doing that? Can we have that in writing?
Well, you have the minutes tonight.
Pardon?
I said we'll have the minutes from tonight.
That's a no?
Oh man, that's a yes.
That's a yes.
Because
It's a yes.
the minutes are recorded,
It's
so yes,
recorded,
it'll be in
yeah.
writing.
Great.
So are there any other questions about Mr. Springmeier's presentation? Actual questions for the presentation? Because you'll still have an opportunity to ask questions and
Oh, we're not done yet.
and testimony. So specific to the survey.
Just what was just now said.
Yeah, I need you to come back to the mic and give your name, please.
Oh, I can do that. Daniel Gill, 3950 South Redwood Road. The last word I had as of last Thursday or Friday from the realtor D. Hansen, the attorneys for the city. He said he thought we're drawing up paperwork for condemnation on our property.
D told you that?
D told me that. Now I can't, he's on vacation, so I can't bring him in here.
Outside of the process, man, because I know it's not the proper place, but I can actually address that comment when the time is appropriate.
Okay.
I'm sorry,
address that.
maybe I'm in
That's
an inappropriate time.
Okay. So any more questions specific to the presentation? Okay. Thank you for your assistance in answering the questions.
Thank you.
Okay, now is the time for testimony for or against the survey in the specific by the landowners, the four spokesmen for the landowners. So now's the time for your open questions and comments. Now's the time.
We'll let you go first.
Yeah.
Well, you have to,
I'll sit on the front row next time.
Yeah.
Go straight to seats, Joe.
So this is your opportunity for the testimony.
Okay, so can I ask questions of you? Is that what this means, or the testimony for me to refute his evidence?
I'll ask for legal to be in specific. Are we answering the questions, or are we just taking testimony why they think it is blight or is not blight?
Eric Bunderson, City Attorney. I'm going to throw this to Brandon, who's actually been the attorney for the RDA on this deal. Come on up, Brandon.
For a minute. Brandon Hill from the City Attorney's Office. So this portion of the presentation would be for the presentation of evidence concerning whether there is or is not blight, as well as evidence concerning whether or not it's appropriate to move forward with the project area plan. I would say that anyone who wants to ask questions of you as the board is free to do that. As the board, you may or may not have those answers, or you may direct city staff to answer that as well.
Okay, thank you. We don't do a lot of these, so we do sometimes need guidance.
Okay, so I'm sorry I missed the bottom line. So you will answer questions now?
Yes, and as a board, if we do not have the answers, we will refer to staff to help us out.
Okay, so if we are not satisfied that we are safe as property owners, and we choose to get together and clean up some of the blight, at what percentage point is this no longer going to be considered?
That's for you. What has to be cleaned up?
See, for example, one of ours was that the dumpster was not enclosed. But our dumpster is on the greenbelt land. It's not on the commercial land. So I think that one's gone already. So what percentage do we have to clean up in order to get rid of the blight?
So Joan, if you'll refer your questions to us, then we'll have either staff or someone else come up and
Okay.
So your question is, if property owners clean up their property, then if it takes away the percentage to qualify for blight,
right,
would we consider not going forward?
What percentage?
So, Mr. Pyle, can you answer that one?
So there's probably two ways to address that. And the first one would be just a straight up answer. As you saw Mr. Springmeier present, there's a particular percentage of the properties that have to fall into the blight designation. So the real question is, how would you get properties off of that blight designation? And really for the purposes of the process we're talking about here, at this point, you're really not going to be able to do that because we've undertaken the consideration to put in place this urban renewal area. So some corrections that would be made to the property would be helpful, and that'd be great. But as you heard Mr. Springmeyer present, there's a whole list of conditions that include that blight designation. So for example, just getting rid of, let's say there was a junked vehicle on a property, or let's say there was weeds on the property, or let's say that there was, some other specific condition to that property. Improving the property in terms of cleanup is helpful, but it doesn't really get to the root question, which is under consideration, which is, as a whole, the area and the properties within the area, is the condition, and again, this isn't a negative statement on the individual properties or the property owners or their opportunities to develop that property. The question before the RDA board is, what can we do, what advantages does putting an RDA, or I'm sorry, excuse me, I've been doing this long enough, I can't
redevelopment area.
picture the changes. Yeah, the URA, the urban renewal area, which used to be called the RDA. What can we do, what opportunities do we have under that structure which will allow us to help the property owners in cooperation with them, which I'll speak to also later as well, and hopefully I might be able to make it a little more comfortable on the eminent domain or how the city has done, or not the city, how the RDAs have done that in the past. But really the point is sort of moved really in answer to your question, because the question before the board is overall to the survey area.
It's over what?
Is it blighted in whole or to a percentage declaration, as Mr. Springmeyer pointed out, or not? So individual actions at this point that were taken, such as cutting weeds or any of the other things I talked about, we're really kind of, in one way, we're sort of past that question anyway. And in another way, that really is another obligation or opportunity, you might say, that really falls out of the side of the whole URA process anyway. I mean, you already have that need and the necessity and the obligation to maintain those properties in those ways. The designation of a survey area is not an attempt or an effort to get properties to get cleaned up. It's merely an observational statement on the condition of them as a whole, in terms of, okay, this area as it's surveyed is in this condition, what can we do about it? It really goes more to the question you asked earlier. Are there things that we can do in cooperation with you as property owners, which there certainly are, and that's really the point of RDAs and URAs in the first place. Or are there other things that you can do as property owners as a group, which you also certainly can do as well?
Okay, so what you have just said kind of sounds like we're in a trap. And there's not a lot of trust right at the moment, and so that didn't help.
Okay, so the other comment I might make at this point is I've never seen you in an RDA hearing before in your life, and I perfectly expect that because you wouldn't have been through this. So it can feel like a trap. It can feel like you're being forced into some situation which is going to take the property, your property control out of your hands, right? And that's really basically what you're feeling right now. And I've seen this a number of times in the past, as have the board. And the reason we've seen that is West Valley City has created over the years of its existence something like, at this point, 16, 17, 18 RDA project areas of this type. And to my knowledge, and to my memory, unless before my time, which I've now been in the position of the RDA Executive Director for 12 years, if I remember right, we never have actually condemned anybody's property. And in fact, we've never created a survey area with the intent of going, just as was stated specific to this project area, of condemning property. The reason we've always created these surveys is to be able to put together, or at least make available the opportunity to put together, a redevelopment project that would benefit everybody that's involved in the area, whether it's the property owners individually, the property owners as a group. Certainly improvement of those properties aids the progress of the city, and we've seen many examples of that throughout these project area projects that we've done over the years. Sometimes they're faster, sometimes they're slower. To the gentleman's point that was made earlier, that somehow just the creation of these areas ends up being a first step in some ultimate goal to take over people's properties, that's just a misperception. And it's a common misperception. I mean,
But it has been used in other places.
In other places, that is correct. And I will also certainly admit, and if that's the right word, that we have had conversations about eminent domain in the past too. There is a place for that tool. Obviously, it's provided for in state law. We have found, because of the expertise, because of the way we have approached these projects, we've never had to use them. The other reason eminent domain becomes such a topic of large discussion in these surveys is because we have to, and state law requires us to do that so that all property owners completely understand the implication of how it could be used, all the questions that you've been asking. Whether it might be used, whether the intent is to be used. We don't talk about eminent domain at some great length and then throw out a statement saying we don't intend to use it just lightly. We have a goal and oftentimes a specific redevelopment plan in place at the beginning of these project areas, but we still have to discuss the whole eminent domain as well as in fact, I mean, that's why we're talking about blight surveys right now, not because we like to go around and say, hey, you know, the dumpster's in the wrong place on property or whatever, but state law requires us to go through very lockstep these steps so that everybody does hear, everybody understands, everybody has the ability and the opportunity to ask questions about the process. And it can seem very frightening and scary and trapping. But I can assure you, because again, I've seen it over and over and over again in these projects, that there's no intent to take property. There's no intent to do anything, really frankly, other than upgrade and bring tools to bear in areas that we can improve the city for everybody, for you as property owners, for the city as a whole.
Have you ever seen the threat of eminent domain used?
I have had conversations where the threat of eminent domain is there and discussed, and what would the possibilities of that mean, both in a friendly and an unfriendly situation, just like Mr. Springmeyer referred to. There are, in fact, actual tax advantages to having that discussion. Sometimes a property owner will bring that discussion to us. Other times we have, yes, indeed, had at least the intellectual discussion of, you know, what would eminent domain in this situation look like.
Have you used the threat of eminent domain on the property owner?
Well, I'm not sure. What do you mean?
Well, because the fact that the property owner knows that's a possibility, it's already twisting their arm to force them to do something they don't want to do.
Okay, so
if there's a threat of eminent domain, even if you don't use it, it still can be a really good bargaining tool for you, right?
No. And I'll tell you the reason why it's not. Because there's a very also set process for acquiring property, which involves the property owner at every step. It involves negotiation and appraisals. It can involve the property owner getting their own appraisers if they would like. There's never, in any situation that I have also seen, also in reference to a comment I made, or I heard earlier from the other gentleman, in which there was any sort of exclusion of possible other buyers or restriction which would somehow limit a property's acquisition to, you know, just the RDA, for example. Again, as I said, it's really been even rare for us to even acquire properties on our own. We have done that as well, but we've also always done that in a negotiating stance that we've been able to conclude favorably and positively with the property owner. And in fact, most of the time, we've usually got some partnership proposal with an internal or an outside developer that works with the property owners themselves. So, does the possibility of eminent domain? Yes, and it's in a very limited way, and it's very tightly controlled. Believe me that both the state legislators who put this law in place, as well as your RDA board members who are elected officials, are very concerned about ever doing anything like that. Why? For the very simple reasons, you know, they represent you, right?
And we know where you live, right?
Exactly right. So they're very reticent to ever do anything outside the bounds of propriety, and even if they were inclined to do that, they're not allowed to, just very simply by laws.
Okay, so that brings me back to my other question. Can't we do this in a positive way so that nobody feels threatened, nobody is forced into something they don't want to do. Can't we do this in a different way?
Well, two answers to that. The first one is we think this is a positive process. And again, through the 15, 16, 17 project areas that we've done, in almost every one of those cases, they've turned out to be very positive. And in the ones that didn't, it's not because there was some battle with the property owners. It's because the conditions simply weren't right and the project area never took off. But even in those situations, we didn't go in and say, hey, we're going to condemn your property, or we're going to take it, and we're going to wait for 10, 15 years to see if something happens. It just didn't take off from a project progression standpoint. So first point again, I mean, it doesn't seem like it right now. I would grant that. Absolutely understand your feelings, and I hear them expressed whenever we've had those. But it is, in the end, a positive process that benefits everybody. To the second, or my second point to your question is, yeah, absolutely. At any time, a group of property owners can get together and put together a redevelopment project or some sort of improvement district, or those sorts of things that can help improve those areas. And you are absolutely free to do that right now. We'd love to see that. We'd love to see that as part of the RDA survey or the RDA project, frankly. So absolutely, nothing ever stopped you from that.
Okay. Can we have it in writing?
Again, I mean, just to the point of where we are right now today, right? You're a group of property owners out there on the street. You could get together at any time and say, hey, let's put this consortium together and pursue project B, which would consider whatever, commercial development, retail development, office development, all those sorts of things. Again, the reason why I speak so confidently that this tool is both positive and necessary and needed is because it's very rare that we ever see that kind of interaction, frankly, possible amongst property owners for a lot of various reasons. People aren't interested, or they don't have the financial backing, or they're just happy with their business as it is, and there's nothing wrong with any of those situations. But the RDA tool, the URA tool, is simply that. It's just another tool in the basket that we can bring out and use to the advantage of property owners to make something better happen on those properties and areas than is happening right now.
So if we were to get together and organize, and we worked together with you guys really well, would you be willing to take the eminent domain off the table?
That would be up to the board. Again, the use of eminent domain or even the possibility of it is always negotiable. And I don't want to say, and I don't want to put them in any sort of position, but let me give you a couple of examples of, again, the restriction of that. This Fairborn Station RDA that was created a few years ago, for example, when that was created, there was a very limited even time frame under the state law at that time that eminent domain could be used. If I remember correctly, the time period was 7 years?
Still, right now, you've got a period of 7 years in order to use from the beginning of that project.
For some reason, I was thinking it was a lot shorter in Fairborn Station.
That's what we've got now. It could have been shorter at the time of Fairborn.
Yeah. So today, it would be 7 years under state law. At that time, in the example I'm using, I think it was 2 years. And we've been able, and that time has long since expired. And we've been able to move forward with property owners and get the Fairborn Station project moving along quite nicely, as you can see just by going out the front door today. And it's not even possible to use eminent domain under that RDA project area any longer. Many of the other project areas are in the same situation.
So you mean you did not use eminent domain and it was off of the table for that project?
That's right.
Even when there was only 2 years?
After 2 years. Now, I also want to be clear, there are other reasons, there are many governmental purposes that you can use eminent domain for besides RDAs or besides URAs. Governmental purposes like building roads, building schools, building airports, all those sorts of things are allowable under government law. But under RDA law, which is of course the question before us tonight, very strict and very limited by time, by request. As Mr. Springmeyer pointed out, there is a very high percentage bar before that has to be agreed to amongst property owners before eminent domain can be even used. So I say all of that in the effort to make you more comfortable with at least the reality, or at least the possibility of what could happen, but not lead you down some path of saying, you know, that under absolutely no circumstance whatsoever would eminent domain ever be used. I don't want to say that because I don't know that that would ever happen. I can say very specifically in all these projects that we've done in the city, the use of eminent domain has either never been done or is so rare as to be extremely improbable. And again, as Mr. Jackson pointed out, that's not the intent in this project either.
So can we ask the board to say whether you'd be willing to take that off the table?
Of course, it's a question.
Put you on the spot?
Let me just kind of give I want to just talk a little bit about the benefits that this actually is for you. It's been brought up a couple of times here about the Granger Crossing area on 35th South. And prior to that becoming an RDA, they tried to get together as a group and create a special improvement district. And so each of the businesses were involved. They each put in a little bit of money each month. The city took care of that in the treasury, and then when they accumulated enough money, they would ask for certain improvements to be made. And they did that for several years, but it still wasn't moving fast enough for them to see the improvements that they really liked. So a few years later, we went through the RDA process, and we went through the blight study, and there were people who were unhappy. But since that time, we've been able to take money from the RDA that's been generated as a result of the taxes, and we've been able to go back and you can see the improvements. Those improvements are because they went through the process and were able to go back and put money into their properties. We're able to put new curbs and gutters in. We're able to do landscaping. We're able to help business owners resurface their exterior of their buildings. And we've done that through the process of the RDA. So it's not your own money. It's money coming from the city. So it's a great benefit to you to, I mean, you can go out and do it yourself, or you can receive the help from the RDA.
Well, actually, we like the help from the RDA. We just don't like the eminent domain.
Well, and
so is there some way that we can do, I know there is a way that we can do it without the eminent domain. I know it's a possibility. So that's what I'm asking for. Can we do both?
I would
because
say...
Because I think we'd all like to have improvements.
I would say that this council, and I can only speak for myself, I wouldn't want to use eminent domain ever. But what I can't feel comfortable with is binding future elected officials. And so I would feel uncomfortable doing that. You know, I might be here 3 more years and somebody else might be sitting here who would agree to use that.
Even if it's only for our project?
I would hate to bind future elected people. So all I can say is I've been on the council for 13 years and we've not used it. So.
Okay, how about you, Karen?
I've only been here 3 years, going on 4, so my seat might be somebody else next year.
Would you be willing to take it off the table?
Personally, probably not, just because it may hurt, and without seeing it, I mean, I'm a property owner too, and I like my control, but if this situation was in my area, if there was a property next to me or in between you and I's property that prohibited us from moving forward with what would be better for the community, and you and I needed the help from the city, it might be something that you would say, oh, now, okay, now I want it. So if it was my property being condemned, I wouldn't want it. But even with the condemnation and everything, you still get market value. They can't take it from you for under what it's worth. And so that to me is a protection as a business owner and a property owner that I would feel comfortable with, just because I know that in other cities, one lone property owner between 2 others has held up things and cost the person on each side a substantial gain on their property. And so I can see sometimes it being a positive.
So the good of the 2 is better than the good of the 1, is what you're saying?
Well, in some circumstances.
That sounds like socialism to me.
Well, and all anyway, we won't go there. So,
but I don't
to the
see,
facts though.
In our project area, I do not see where one property owner would stop the progress of any other development.
And that's what, as city staff, I mean, they've said it in the opening, and Ms. Pryla said it again. We do not foresee that being a problem. And that's why we're comfortable leaving it there, because honestly, this isn't so that that's our end game, but it's there in case there is a huge problem. But like they said, in all the ones we've done, we've never used it. It's never had to be there. And
we don't want to be the
see it as
first.
a threat. No. So any other questions at this point? Or testimony?
Yes, and I had a comment for you, and I just lost it. So when I think of it, I'll ask it again. Tom, would you give up eminent domain for us?
I've been here 3 years at the same time with Ken Land, and I've been here 3 years. I have not seen anything in my term here yet. To be honest with you, I'm very frank. I would love to work with the property owner in many ways to work them out. And just like Steve Vincent says, I don't know the future, like the official they're going to do with that state law, you know what I'm saying? But I try to work with the home or the property owner as much that I can, try to work them out. I'm not going to use that one.
But you're not going to give up the strong arm?
No, actually, that is state law. So, but I will go extra mile to work with the property owner.
Okay, can I ask the rest of you what you would say?
I would say that this is the first hearing I've been in where the option of using eminent domain existed. And I would like to hear the rest of the testimony on this. I do have some concerns because I have been or have heard of situations where eminent domain was used and the threat of eminent domain has been used. And as much as we like to say in government or in our government that would never happen, I've heard that statement used by a homeowner that they were threatened with eminent domain in this city. Now, it's not recent. And so I have some real questions, but before I commit, I want to hear the full story. And I will tell you I have serious reservations about ever using eminent domain, and there is never a justification unless the end result is so obvious and so clear that government should do it. Only then, in most extreme circumstances, should it be used. And that's a personal philosophy. But I also feel, I've heard a brief presentation, I've heard your comments, and I would certainly love to hear some of the rest of this.
Okay.
And I'm still very open. I thought this was an easy thing, but obviously it's not. And so I'm withholding whether I will vote in favor of this UDA or the URA.
URA.
Okay. Urban renewal area, okay. As a concept, because I've just not seen how it worked. I know that there's been success in the past, and I say, okay, it would sure be nice to hear from some of those to know how it actually worked out. It's very easy to talk here. It's very easy to say yes or no, but you just would like to have a little better information. So I'm going to withhold mine, but I could go either way right at this point.
Okay, thank you. Can I get a short answer from you?
I'll give you the short answer. Thank you for coming, and I appreciate you coming and speaking to us and letting us know your concerns. I think that we are all concerned for this area and for you as the property owners and for the rest of us as residents in our city. We want our city to be great. I think that's what you want, and I think that's what we all want. And my short answer is I'm not willing to take that off the table just because, even though I really,
it would take a really high bar for me to approve ever using eminent domain. I have philosophical differences with using that, unless that's the only course for something that's going to be beneficial for all of us as a city. And like the mayor said, it would have to be quite obvious to me and to others who are looking at this. That would be the tool. Right now, I would say we're not going to use that, but I don't know what the future will bring. I know that I'm concerned for this area, and whether we designate it as blight or not, there's problems in that area, and it could be better, and that's really what we want. And I think that's what you want too.
And that's what we all want.
And I'm happy to hear you say that you want to work together with your neighbors and with the city to come to some great solutions there. And really that's what we want to do. And we'd love to work with you.
Should I ask her?
She doesn't vote, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Okay. In the back, please. And the same name and address, please.
Okay, my name is Sally Jones, and I live at 5355 West, 3500 South. Grown up in that area my whole life. The eminent domain and the condemning of property, you wouldn't think that Bluffdale, Utah would use that either, like West Valley, but my grandfather, Wilford Rushton, lost, what was it, 200 acres to being condemned because he wouldn't sell. Now, I'm here with my girlfriend that her mother owns property on Redwood and her father owns property. They're car lots. You do the redevelopment. She's making a good income. It's what she planned for her retirement, for her years from now on. She's done the improvement she feels she needs to do. So she's happy. She doesn't want anything more than just that. You do the development around her car lot. You allow that car lot to stay as is. If you don't, if you have a problem with it, what do you do at that point? She's not going to sell. She doesn't want to sell. She wants to keep this going. It's fine with her. You guys have got this whole area around it, and it's part of the Redwood Drive-In property. It's right on the corner, so it's a big lot of land, but hers is small. What happens then if she doesn't fit your rules or whatever with the redevelopment?
I'll try and answer that. If a property owner does not want to accept money from the RDA to improve their property, they don't have to.
And so
in fact, most of the property owners would apply for help from the RDA. If you don't want to apply for help from the RDA and get money from your city, you don't have to.
So how does that work? You give them a percentage and they've got to meet certain requirements. Get rid of the property, which?
No, I don't think that's the way it works. They would apply to the RDA and say, these are the improvements we would like to make. The RDA would review that and determine whether or not that was an appropriate use of the RDA funds. Now, if you don't want to do any improvements, all you would have to do is meet the city's standard code enforcement rules, and so code enforcement isn't there. But beyond that, I think I'm
and you would allow a car lot to sit in the middle of maybe buildings or whatever?
Well, if the developer doesn't want to buy your piece of property, then he doesn't want to buy. I mean, we're not buying it. This is a developer that's going to be looking at this.
But you have the right to use the eminent domain with that, the builder that's buying it. I mean, that becomes a part of it. Then where's the threat of eminent domain, like it says on the paper?
Probably the simplest way to answer your question in the very beginning is every one of these, again, project areas that we have done over time has always shifted and been adjusted and worked with property owners and brought different developers into the mix, or frankly, in some cases, nothing at all has happened on the properties. And a lot of times it's, for example, exactly the reason that you're talking about and asking about. Any economic development project has to have all kinds of dominoes, if you will, stand up and fall into place before any project works. And foremost amongst one of those is the property, obviously the property owner's interest in the first place. So To Steve's observation, which is entirely correct, RDA funds can be used in a lot of different ways. They can be used on very small scale and minor types of improvements like curb and gutter and sidewalk, street lighting, that sort of thing. On the other end of that scale, they can be used to fund way into the future debt done in a lot larger development sense that would involve multiple properties. But right now, for example, in this survey area and this project area, we don't have plans at all along those lines. We simply are contemplating the use of the RDA tool to allow us to be able to bring plans like that forward. So any plan that was brought forward along that line would take into account exactly the sorts of questions you're asking about, whether it's your friend's car lot, or whether it's the Redwood Drive-In, or whether it's any one of the properties that are in that survey area.
Okay, thank you.
I'm Harla McQueen at 3725. And I have two questions. And the first question is that, I think the eminent domain is extremely terrifying. And with the Supreme Court decision a few years ago, it makes it a wicked tool. So fix it. And the next question I have to ask you is, we had had a business on Redwood Road for close to 40 years. And any adjustments we made, or anything we did, the ordinance enforcer was there, and he was there a lot. And it was weeds, or one time a warrant was issued for my arrest for improper signage because I just neglected to respond. But I'm wondering, with all of this blight, and some of the blight that was on our property, weeds and such, and one little tire that was stuck behind something, and I'm thinking, where are these enforcers? It feels a little bit like we've been set up for blight, in some sense. Not that we all shouldn't take responsibility for our property, but where is this guy that used to come in and say, wait a minute, or send out the notices? And it does feel a little bit like a setup, actually. That's it.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to take this opportunity for testimony? Come on up and give us your name, and I think we don't need the address, just the name.
I'm sorry. Daniel Gill, 3950 South Redwood Road. It is a little disappointing that we've come to this juncture where that you have said we can't change this. This is the way it is because it's already come to this place, but we had no idea it was even in process. And yet we're here, and we didn't have opportunity prior to have involvement until now. We've been told it's already gone along too far, and so we can't, we might be able to apply to opt out, but it really isn't the kind of thing that you can get in or get out. I'm not really clear as to what was said there. I'm in favor of improvement. I certainly am. I want to see improvement. I'd like to do what I can to have improvement. And so, please don't mark me as just totally a stick in the mud here. But then I have a question. Of course, our property is a church property. Can a church property make application for whatever funding? Sometimes nonprofits can or cannot be involved in that. So just point of information there. And I think for now, I've probably said more than I should have. Thank you for your time.
So, Mr. Powell, would you like to address that?
Yes, ma'am, and so the short answer is yes. Any property would be available to participate in RDA. Honestly, even a governmental property would, let's say, for example, there was a county or a state property, and it happened to be in the RDA project area. The same benefits of even having a property in that area might not apply But in principle, yes, even those properties could participate, so yes, yours would be able to as well.
Okay. Anyone else?
My name's Ken McQueen, 3725. Why? That's my question.
Someone else about one, or?
I think Councilman Nordfeld
Yeah.
said it the very, very best, if he wants to restate what he said about the city.
Didn't get what he said.
Well, I think the reason that we want to do this is because we love our city, and you love the city too, and we want to work together with you to make this area better. I think that.
I don't love the city.
Well, okay,
I didn't
I'm
want
sorry.
the city.
I misspoke.
I was here long before.
I assumed that most of the property owners, maybe not all, want to see the property improved, and want to see their business improve, and the area to be nicer.
Well, that still doesn't answer my question of why. You're pushing an RDA. What's the other term that they use?
URA.
Tax.
Oh, tax.
Yeah, you haven't used that word, and that's what really RDA is all about.
Right.
Okay.
And that will come when they do the project area of the budget. We'll learn about what the tax increment is. We won't know that right now.
This is an interesting thing. I wish the Redwood Drive-In man was here. Years ago, they wanted to sell or make apartments, applied to West Valley. They turned him down. No, we've got way too many apartments in West Valley. Now you want to make the whole place apartments. You're shaking your head, but that's what you're building all along tracks and wonderful tracks everywhere. I still would like you to explain to me why to blight the thing, to put the RDA in place. Is it to what?
Improve.
Improve.
That's it.
Okay.
Period. Improve. All right. That's the simplest thing we can say.
You mentioned sidewalks and curb and gutter and your beautiful, what's the word they use? Streetscape. Every one of us here thinks it's a joke. You want us to pay for it. Now you're going to have RDA pay for it? I wanted to rebuild after I had a fire 5 years ago. You said you'd like to work with business people. Not me. You ran me out. So I'm now in South Salt Lake. So this wonderful sidewalk deal that you have, you passed over Smith's when they spent $1 million. Never did get an answer from your zoning boys on that. I guess that's just a comment. So if this goes through, are you saying your RDA money will pay for the sidewalk in front of my property?
No, we're not saying that will. I was using that as examples of improvements that could be used. It might be. It could be in conjunction with you as property owners. If you together with us and a plan was decided upon that included, as you mentioned, streetscape type improvements, that could be done. That's not the plan currently, but that's a use that could be implemented.
The last meeting I had with their planning and zoning, they weren't sure if they were going to do away with that or not. That's your great-grandchildren will never see that finished across there because of the property. You can't force them to do it. I think that's kind of strange, the way it goes, and then it jigs off, and then it goes back, and you're obviously, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Well, no, I don't think it is, but it is obvious that I know what you're talking about, but I can make a guess, and one of the best answers I can give as to how development or even improvement occurs, because sometimes it can see haphazard. And if you're talking about the sidewalk improvements over there in Redwood, how they happen in one property and then it skips and then another one happens.
Yeah.
That's the natural balance of us trying to work with property owners. Sometimes we can get it done sooner, sometimes we can't get it done sooner, so we have to wait for the next opportunity to do. Again, the RDA is another tool that could accomplish that goal in getting that project done as well.
Okay, well,
there are many projects that we have been able to accomplish in the city that, you know, somebody came and said, I don't believe that'll ever be done, or it can't be accomplished, or you know, whatever. There's just not enough incentive or unity or whatever to do, and we've proved that wrong over and over again. So I'm a little bit more of an optimistic nature, I guess, than some people are when it comes to government development, I suppose. But that does come from the experience that I have been able to witness here in West Valley of many projects that have come to fruition and in great terms have improved the city.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And I've only lived here for, I guess it's 20 years now, or a little bit over, so I don't quite have the experience you do, but I have seen great improvement here in the city. And these tools, the RDA and the URA, as it's now called, have been a big part of that.
All right. Well, like the majority of people here, I'm not worried about condemnation. That seems to be everybody else's concern. That's not mine. It's just why, and you still really haven't ended. You want to make it beautiful, and that was like this streetscape that was all on the property owner's back. Now, if you're saying that the RDA money will come in and pay for that.
And again, I'm not saying it will.
I know. I'm not holding you to anything. I mean, it's, I'll just finish by saying I'm not happy either with being in a blighted area. I'd like to see this gentleman's title also. Thank you.
Well, here one example I want to give it to you, so maybe you can see this. See the mall right here, the fair mall right here. It's behind us. Basically, it's just kind of like the that way. That was URDA, or now we call URA. 10, 15 years ago, you see the teenager just stood there and play around and, you know, do some stupid thing. But you see right now, you see a lot of restaurants and banks, and you see it's a really nice retail stores there. So you see that's improvement that we try to do.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I have one very simple question.
Okay, name and address?
My name is Lowell Brown, and the property is 3985 South Redwood Road. And the question is simply, when do you expect to make your final decision on this particular URA in the blighted area?
Tonight we will accept a motion from the board to either accept or deny.
So your final decision will be made tonight one way or
Unless...
another. Thank you.
Oh, wait. So the attorney is waving his hand that I spoke incorrectly. I know there's somewhere here that says I asked for a motion, so let's have him clarify.
Just one quick clarification that might help everybody out. So tonight, what we're making a decision about is whether or not blight exists in the area. And that's it. There's no decision on a formal plan. There's no decision on whether or not there's going to be eminent domain or whether anybody's going to have any property impacted by that. It lets a plan be formulated, which will be brought back to this board for their decision. And you'll have an opportunity to comment on that as well and to look at the specifics there. But tonight, it's just about whether there's blight or not, nothing else.
Thank you. And oh, can you come tell me your name, please?
Brandon Hill with the City Attorney's Office.
Thank you. All right, are there any more questions?
One quick one?
Go ahead. Yep. Name?
Daniel Gill, 3950 South Redwood Road. The URDA money that would be accrued from the taxes. That's money we could borrow from. That's not money that the URDA would be paying for the improvement. Isn't that, I mean, how does that work? I have no idea.
Either of those two instances could occur. I have seen RDA projects where RDA funds were used in like a revolving loan sort of a situation. I've also seen RDA projects where tax increment funds, as we mentioned earlier, were actually used to fund improvements again, which could be infrastructure, could be roads, could be other things we've talked about. So either of those could also happen. Again, I want to be sure to clarify, and Brandon just pointed it out again here, this is the first step in a long process, or one of the first steps in a long process. None of that has been decided yet.
Thank you.
My name's Mary Ann Rowley, 3910 South. So you're talking about this money that we get. Where does that money come from? Do you raise the taxes and you give it back to us?
Great question. Okay, so the whole concept of tax increment is basically based on this. A property value in an RDA project area right now is worth X amount, right, in its current status. And after an RDA project is created, that status of the property tax level and then any improvements that are made above that level, the tax increment or the tax that property tax that is generated, so to speak, above what that base level, then go into that project area. So there's not any magic money that just appears out of nowhere. Any of those tax increment dollars that appear are appearing because of development.
So we make the improvements, you raise our taxes, and then you give it back to us? No. Did I miss something?
Yeah. We don't raise taxes. There's no tax increase.
Okay, then where's the money coming from?
Again, okay, so let's say House A or commercial building B exists on Redwood Road right now, and for the sake of just discussion, I'll say it's worth $100,000, okay? And then some developer comes in or development occurs either in conjunction with the current property owner or a new property owner, and now all of a sudden that building's worth $1 million. There's $900,000 in property value in between there. The tax increment or the property tax is generated off of that $900,000. So it's not a tax increase to you, it's a tax increase that is generated by the development of that property, or tax revenues that are generated by the development of that property. Does that make more sense?
Yes, but if we improve our property, that'll increase our value and our taxes
will go up. That's correct, just like they would in any other situation. And then you can use, but you then will be able to use those tax revenues that are generated specific in that area as opposed to spread out across other entities and the city as a whole.
Okay, do you have any more comments at this point? Okay, so our next move is to hear from any of the taxing entities that would be affected by this classification. Is there anyone representing a tax entity that would like to speak?
Water district.
Water district, school district, any of those representatives? So, seeing none, we will now close the public hearing portion of this, and probably for my own benefit at least, can I get a motion for a 5-minute break? Let everybody walk around for a minute, and then we'll be right back and finish up with our open discussion and decision.
Motion for a short break. Second.
Okay. And all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll see you in 5 minutes.
I mean, it's my job to go and find all these little things. Railroad ties and that could be that's time on survey. Start to put those all together with everything. This isn't about you as a board. This isn't a judgment of you as a steward. This is an instrument and let's read it. Try to Here's what happens. Here's the reason it is. If let's use Brad position. This is your business is going to be, I've never said it's going to be solved. This but something new is going to Mr. Adams said, if this is valued at $1 million, taxes are paid, buy the property. This property will change your value. If you took your property, yes. If you took this property and suddenly you decided to put a restaurant or something, you do whatever it is, but only because it's maybe that we need there's a sewer, there's a utility line. Somebody is local, but it's that's the
and I don't have the yeah, there's no
So we are now over our 5 minutes, so we can get everybody to come back to the dais and take their seats. All right, we'll now reopen our RDA meeting and put it toward, or for the board to have discussion.
Chairman, I'd just like to make a comment. I think an important distinction was made right there at the end from the city attorney that this is just a determination of whether or not it was blight. I think it's obvious that there's some issues in the area and it touches on most of the properties, and so I think that as far as this study goes, I think it's clear that there is blight, you know, on percentage of property that is indicated. Now, in the future, as we come forward with an actual plan and a budget, and we can start talking about tax increment, I think that's where we have all these discussions that the residents have brought up tonight. But I think in regards to tonight, I believe that there's clear evidence that there's blight in the area.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mr. Bigelow?
Thank you. Thank you. As I've listened to the discussion, it's been a great education for me to actually sit in what used to be theoretical and now see it practically applied. And as I've listened especially to the concerns about eminent domain, and I've heard two reasons expressed why we shouldn't take that off the table. We don't want to bind future councils, and there may be a situation where it's a benefit to one of the property owners to get an extension on the amount of time to reinvest their money. And both of those are odd to me, because as a council, we bind future councils all the time, and much more significantly than eminent domain. I don't mean to belittle a piece of property in the city or a particular business, but you know, we go out and bond for tens of millions of dollars that commit future councils for sometimes 20, 30 years. So binding a future council isn't a real big issue to me. The taking of property is, and so far I haven't heard any others, that this thing with a property owner wanting to get an extension on time, it's almost like we're kind of playing games with other government entities who put that rule in place. So I don't think I have any problem with taking eminent domain off on this, because certainly I don't think we have any plans to build a, you know, if the city wanted it, what would we use it for? Well, a park or another building. We don't really need another building in that area. I'm not sure a park in that location is ideally suited for most of our citizens. Not that I'm against parks. I would like to buy some land for parks. In fact, if there was ever anything to actually have the city spend money on other than what we're already doing, it would be for some more open space. And certainly I'd advocate for that. I'd be willing to commit buying some future councils to that. But apart from that, I don't see a reason why the city would need any land there. So then the only other one is if there's some major development, a Cabela's wants to come in and the property isn't big enough, so we need to get various parcels. That's the only one I can think of, and maybe there are others. But I doubt that that would happen, and I don't think I would really support that anyway. So I'm okay with taking eminent domain off the table. I may be the only one that feels that way, but that's fine. But I do see value. I do see value in some aspects of a urban renewal, a URA type of proposal, because we can do it for the benefit of multiple businesses. So I guess I'm not there yet to say it's totally bad, and so I think I'm in support of that. But then I'm just getting familiar with it as long as it's used for the right purposes. And I think when the plan comes back, that's where we exercise the control to say, I'm fine doing this for those who want to optionally upgrade, and as long as no one is forced to participate in that, and these are optional and they are of benefit not just to that particular street, but to West Valley City as a whole, maybe there's some value in that. So I'm just learning this, and it helped very much even to have some off-the-record comments with some of those in the audience to help solidify that. So those are my comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mayor, and I would just say that, I agree with everything you just said, and those decisions, like you said, would be made not today. I mean, the eminent domain discussion, all that, isn't a discussion for the blight study, but it is a discussion for the project plan when we finally receive that, and how we would, exercise our authority at that time. So I agree with you, but this isn't the time that we make that decision.
Madam Chair, if I may. No, and I agree, but I can go on record anytime I want.
Certainly, absolutely.
So although I cannot make, it wouldn't be appropriate to make a motion, it certainly would express my personal feelings. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Okay. Then, anyone have a motion considering adopting or not adopting resolution number 15-2? Mr. Bueller. Bigelow. Sorry.
No, that was a compliment. That was a compliment. Thank you. I would make the motion that it is appropriate to accept the results of the blight study and authorize our staff to move forward on that and come back with a plan and a proposal.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And all opposed? The motion is passed unanimously, and we will move on to the next part of this process. Our next item is a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.